Joining us now is One America's very own Jennifer Franco. Jennifer, it's a little bit bittersweet. You've kind of been through us throughout the entire impeachment process since the very beginning. And now here we are. We saw closing arguments yesterday. We're going to see the final vote tomorrow. What should our viewers be looking out for as far as what's happened over the past couple hours and moving into tomorrow?
Yeah, so yesterday we saw the Senate adjourn until tomorrow after both sides made their closing arguments, like you already mentioned. And with that, just some highlights sort of to bring this all to a close. We heard from the president's legal defense team, who basically said that the House conducted themselves above the law, as if they were above the law, saying that they ultimately are not above the law. And this process was sort of defunct from the start because of the way that they started issuing subpoenas before, doing that House vote initially. So they really blasted them for that. And again, called this process partisan. And then we heard from the Democrats, lead impeachment manager Adam Schiff, making his last pitch to senators. Of course, they are the jurors in all of this. Trying to encourage them to convict and remove the president when they vote tomorrow, saying that ultimately if they choose not to fulfill their constitutional duties, that it's going to set a dangerous precedent for future presidents, and ultimately meaning that Congress may not be able to check a president in the future if they're found of doing anything wrong, any criminal activity of that sort. So that's where we stand heading into tomorrow.
And, there's no denying the fact that there was a little bit of an element of 2020 in regards of all of this. Democrats say that the president was trying to rig the 2020 election by asking Ukraine for foreign assistance in the election. And the president's supporters also saying that this is just about an effort to hinder the president's re-election efforts when it comes to 2020. And overlapping with all of this, it just didn't take off the way that Democrats were hoping for. I mean, we saw that the TV ratings were generally very low. We saw that the overall support for impeachment just wasn't at the point where it needed to be in order to really pressure those Republican senators to flip. Of course, they needed 67 in the upper chamber, and they just weren't getting 20 Republican senators to flip for that matter. So what else is really being taken away throughout this process? Acknowledging where we are now, what else should we be understanding about what's happened throughout this entire time?
So I think it's important to take into consideration the sentiment among voters. Of course, we're heading into an election. November is just a few months away. Time flies when you're having fun. And so essentially, a good indicator of all of this and how it's been affecting voters is this new Gallup poll that came out today. And it shows a new personal best for President Trump. He's at 49% approval rating right now, which is a new high for him. And it's sort of telling because especially his campaign can use this to back up his point of the fact that this whole entire impeachment process for the last year and a half or whatnot, since, it all got started, it really hasn't moved the needle against the president. It sort of worked in his favor, like they have said. The campaign's been fundraising off of this. They've been using impeachment to their favor. And ultimately, this new poll sort of is reflective of that. And if you break it down even further, I mean, the president's thriving within the Republican Party, has a 94% approval rating within Republicans. And even with independents, he's at 42% right now in this new Gallup poll. And that's a 5-point uptick from the previous one. So another interesting thing, too, to note from that is how polarized things are. If you look at the numbers from Republicans to Democrats, so 94% approval among Republicans, 7% among Democrats, that's an 87-point difference. That's how polarized the country is right now heading into November.
And I think to your point a little bit, too, is this is kind of playing out a little bit that a lot of, experts and analysts were predicting. People didn't expect Democrats to get to that 67 number. And here we are, we're on the eve of this vote, and it looks like the president is going to be acquitted. And that kind of gives him a big win going into an election year. And of course, a lot of people who were skeptical of impeachment at first said, why would you want to do that? We could, of course, continue investigating him in the House. We can maybe go other methods to kind of hinder his chances in 2020 without going to this drastic measure of being impeachment. Because we saw actually after the Clinton impeachment that he also got that uptick in support that you're talking about right now. So now we're at this point. What comes next?
Yeah, so tomorrow the Senate's going to convene, and sometime in the afternoon they're going to have that vote. They're going to vote on the 2 articles of impeachment against the president. They're either going to vote to convict and remove, or they're going to vote to acquit him of the charges brought by those 2 articles of impeachment. It's looking like it's going to be an acquittal. We heard from Mitch McConnell, and even just based on the tally, if you do a rough tally, there's more than 34 senators that have either come out and flat out said, you know what, I'm not going to vote to convict, or they vocalized the fact that even though they don't necessarily agree with the way that President Trump handled the situation with Ukraine, they don't necessarily think that it merits removing him from office. And so a lot of eyes are going to be, especially on some of those, moderate Democrats. Joe Manchin is a perfect example. Like you mentioned earlier, it's very likely we're going to see a bipartisan acquittal tomorrow because somebody like Joe Manchin, who's been on the fence this entire time, recently spoke on the Senate floor, actually, and he is proposing a censure. He's saying ultimately he doesn't agree with what President Trump did in regards to Ukraine, but at the same time, he just doesn't think removing him from office is a good idea. It's going to be very divisive. This is something we've also heard from Lamar Alexander, a moderate Republican, Lisa Murkowski, a moderate Republican. But I would say that the one Republican to keep an eye on is the one Republican who's kind of been making waves in the headlines this entire process, and that would be Senator Romney of Utah. He's been an outspoken critic of President Trump. Surprise, surprise, right? Yeah. And he did vote with the Democrats in the last time when they voted to call additional witnesses. We know that failed, but he might be a wild card tomorrow. We don't know. Yeah,
and to your point, too, a lot of people who are skeptical of the impeachment process said that there was a chance, actually, if they went the censure route, that there could have been bipartisan support kind of condemning the president. We've seen Lamar Alexander, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney say that they aren't necessarily happy with the way that the president handled this situation, but it just doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. So on the other side of that coin, there was a chance that Democrats could have come out of this with an essential win, condemning the president with a little bit of a censure. But now here they are. They went the impeachment route, and it's not looking like it's going to work out good for them.
Yeah.
Jennifer Franco, thank you very much for joining us once again.
You're welcome. Thank you.